Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video, and this is gonna be a bit of a special one. So, to give you the idea of what this is, I, out of boredom, ended up watching some older Linus Tech Tips videos from the early 2010s and mid 2010s, you know, around the GTX 600, 700 and Intel 3000 and 4000 era. I just ended up watching some of them because I was bored and YouTube recommended it to me. And as I was watching these, I kind of realized something, and that is I never really experienced what a PC from that era was like, despite me getting into PC hardware just around that time. Now, if you didn't know, my first PC was an i5-3570, two 4GB green PCB Micron sticks of DDR3 1333 that ran at JDEC, an MSI B75 something OEM motherboard, like really low end, and a GTX 650. So, not a very great PC, it especially the graphics card. Pretty bad. And it didn't take that long for me to upgrade that PC to the same thing, except that the graphics card became a 780 Ti. So, because I was mostly playing just GPU-heavy games, I pretty much went from bottom barrel to highest end available at the time, and I just skipped right over what this PC represents, which is the, you know, reasonable segment of the early to mid 2010s. And yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of old hardware lying around. I have a bunch of handy-downs from family and also just stuff that I acquired over time, and I thought to myself, hey, let's build a PC that represents that time, and let's run some games on it to re-experience that time, but from a perspective that is a bit more adequate than what I did. So yeah, this PC is exactly that. So I guess let's open this thing up. This is gonna be really weird to focus on. Let's move the side panel. I specifically swapped the side panels around. Usually this side has the on-off switch, but you know, would have a cable dangling on it, and I couldn't do this. And yeah, I didn't do any cable management, as you can see. Like, the entire PC is not looking that great. Like, it's missing the DVD drive because the front USB 3.0 cable is like right in the way. So I couldn't put that in, and also the case itself is not in a great state. This is actually much better than it was when I got it. Like, this PC, like the case is from my dad's old PC, and this PC, like this case, was under his desk in a very dusty corner for many years until he upgraded it like a year ago, I think. So this case was absolutely disgusting because I don't know what it is, but I've seen it happen to multiple of like these cases. The plastic parts, like the handle, the front part, and the dust filter up here, they just become sticky. Something in the plastic just makes them incredibly, like, actually sticky, like honey. And of course this attracts dust. Like, it literally turns into a fly trap. And this case was disgusting when I got it. What I did to somewhat fix that is just remove all the plastic parts and literally run them through my dishwasher. Now, this didn't get rid of this, but it's no longer sticky. It's now like normal plastic. It just looks, it's really worn down. The front is a lot better. Like, this is actually clean, and the dust filter is still a bit not great. But yeah, like, the case is now a lot better than it was before. And here's to the inside. So the cooler that's on the CPU, that's a Cooler Master 120mm AIO. That cooler is also from my dad's old PC. It was in this case. And I'm using it here because it's literally the only heatsink that I have that fits LGA 11XX sockets. because all the other coolers that I have that are not custom water blocks are for LGA 775, which has a ever so slightly smaller mounting hole spacing, so none of that fits. But yeah, so the rest is actually quite a lot of parts from my sister's old PC, who I gave my X370 board and 1800X Ryzen to. And yeah, so the power supply is from her old PC. This power supply actually has a bit of a problem where the 24 pin is somewhat faulty. You need to like bend it in a very specific way, or the PC won't start when you press the power button. And she also had a problem where like the PC does start, but then it gets stuck posting because apparently something isn't getting power properly. I haven't had that now. This power supply I basically just use for test firing up e-powers when I build them on my modding desk. But right now it's in this PC. So yeah. The SSD is actually just one of my bench SSDs. So that's a new part. This has like a Windows 11 on it. And I just kept that for the OS because like Windows 7, a bunch of games won't run on Windows 7 anymore, and you know, Windows 10, Windows 11 not really that big of a difference, so I just kept that. The CPU and motherboard are also from my sister. The CPU is an i5-4690, not a K, so it's locked, and the motherboard is an MSI B85ME45, also from my sister, and it like you can look at the VRM and you know everything about this board that there is to know. Also T-topology. Yeah, like I was a bit concerned when I put the cooler on this board because like it's Haswell / Devil's Canyon, so they have a fully integrated voltage regulator, which means that you don't need nearly as powerful of a V-Core VRM or VCC in VRM on this platform as you do on other platforms, because it's putting like 1.8 volts into the CPU, and then the CPU itself turns that into like 1.1 volts V-Core. So much higher voltage means much lower current, means you can actually get away with a 3-phase VRM. Yes, this is a 3-phase, it uses 2 inductors per phase. And there's also no iGPU VRM or anything because it has a fully integrated voltage regulator. This is really just a 3-phase VCC in, and that's basically the only VRM that the CPU has. But I was a bit concerned that this VRM might overheat because these boards, like these super cheap B-series boards, they're kinda designed with the assumption that you're not gonna spend any extra money on a custom heatsink either, and you're just gonna be running the stock heatsink, which is a downdraft cooler, which would indirectly create airflow over those MOSFETs. But as I've already said, I only have this AIO, which creates absolutely no airflow around the socket area. So I put in this fan and use up the last fan connector on this board. This only has 3, and 2 of those are used for the AIO. So I hope that this fan is kind of like creates a bit of an airflow path. It's been fine so far, but I wouldn't be surprised if these MOSFETs get very hot. Speaking of the cooler as well, the cooler is also kind of faulty. Like my dad first complained to me about the heatsink when his PC, basically the fan would just spin at 100% when his PC wasn't doing anything. And we would open hardware info and the CPU would be like at 100 degrees. And I checked the heatsink and it was full of dust, and I thought that was the problem, but actually turned out later that the problem is that the pump on this thing doesn't always turn on. Like 50% of the time you turn this PC on and like the LED will be on the heatsink, like the block, but the pump actually won't run. You need to like unplug the 3-pin fan header and then plug it back in until you start hearing like water getting circulated in the thing. Because sometimes the pump just doesn't run on this, which is interesting. Like as soon as I turn this on, I always check the CPU temperatures, because then I need to open up the side panel and play unplug and replug a bunch of times until the pump starts up. So yeah, it's not the most reliable computer. When it comes to the RAM, this is some Nanya stuff. I think 2 gigabit C die or D die or something like that. It's dual rank, so, it's DDR3. As far as I know, DDR3 you pretty much always want to have just dual rank. And yeah, this is slightly overclocked. We're gonna get into what exactly I did a bit later. And the XMP of this RAM is actually 1866, which doesn't run on this board because it's a B-series board and a locked CPU, which means 1600 is the maximum. So, yeah. But it did tighten down some timings, and it did net me like another 15 gigaflops on the CPU over just XMP, so I guess that's fine. But yeah, like it's just pretty generic DDR3. There's not really anything special about this. Like with a K-series CPU and a Z-series motherboard, as far as I know, you can get like 2133 or 2400 to run on these chips. But I don't have a CPU or motherboard like that, and I certainly don't have the DDR3 experience to actually do it, so the RAM is not really that well overclocked. Now, coming to our graphics card. This is a part of mine. This is one of my 760 192-bit cards, and originally I wasn't planning on actually using this card. I wanted to really put like a 680 in this, which admittedly the 680 is the top-end model of the 600 series, but like this CPU is from the time where the 700 series already existed, and a 770 is just a 680, except that it has a different name and slightly higher clocked memory. So I really wanted to put like a 680 in this, but none of my 680s actually fit in this. Like my classified is that needs custom water cooling. My WindForce has problems and is also 3 slots, which won't have problems here. And my reference card has capacitor soldered to the back of it that would collide with the RAM slots. So yeah. Also the two 770s I have are still very dead. And well, I had a 670 once. I killed that one. And yeah, that's it. I only have the 760 192 bits. So I used one of these. It is not as powerful as I would want in this. I could have used a 7950 as well, or something like that, but I really wanted something GK104 based for no other reason than I just wanted a GK104 based card. Because like, back in the day, like back around this time, I was a massive Nvidia fanboy. Which I kind of regret because GCN is a really nice architecture to overclock. But yeah, I would have gotten a GK104 card if I had bought like a mid-range card around the time. So I wanted something GK104 based, which just is the 760 192-bit, which is about the slowest version of the GK104 that you can get, but this card is actually surprisingly capable, as we're going to see in the games, but it is fairly cut down. It only has 1.5 gigabytes of VRAM, the power limit is very low, the operating voltage is very low, therefore the clock speeds are also kind of low, and it doesn't really have that many cores either. So yeah, a bit on the lower end side for the graphics card, but it is still fine. And if my camera would finally decide to focus properly, that would be it for the PC build itself. So let's close this back up and show you how it runs. So, welcome to the wonderful as ever MSI UEFI BIOS. This is just really, I need to give a shout out to MSI here, that on this motherboard from, I don't know, when is this from? Like like basically a decade ago, the BIOS works exactly the same as it does on my B550 Unify X. Now it has a lot less options, but I do like that MSI's BIOS is just, they figured it out once and they've just been using it ever since, and that makes using this BIOS so much easier than trying to figure out like what a DDR3 platform like Asus Gigabyte or ASRock BIOS looks like, because anyway, so I did overclock this PC kind of as much, well, not really as much as I could. I could have done a lot more to the RAM. But basically, I was planning to just set 103 BCLK and maybe max out the CPU ratio as much as I could. But the thing is, this motherboard doesn't actually allow you to set BCLK. I couldn't find any way to set that, so we're still at 100 megahertz, which is a bit disappointing. So really, when it comes to the CPU, everything I was able to do is just set the CPU cores and the ring just to 3.9 gigahertz, and then set that to fixed and hope that this will keep the CPU just at 3.9 all the time. I can already tell you it doesn't. It goes down to like 3.7 every now and then, but that should still be better than what you would get without doing this. So we gained a little bit, I guess. And then there's, of course, our RAM. So we're on BB85, which means 1600 is the highest it goes. We can't go higher than this. So the DDR3 1866 XMP profile that's on this RAM kit, that would be profile 2, doesn't actually work. So I'm instead using the I presumably backup profile that they put on here for exactly this case, where it does use 1600 with some slightly tighter timings. And what I did is basically those are from the XMP, and yeah, TRC, TRA, EFI, TRRD, and T4 I just set manually, as well as these ones, which I just set because there is no different DIMM, so I guess there wasn't really any point to that. But yeah, so slightly tweaked timings. I could have done a lot more here. Like, I could have done a lot more here, but I didn't. And honestly, the gains that I've been seeing, not really that much on this platform. Like, RAM tweaking has become a lot more important on newer platforms where you have more cores, higher clock speeds, and hyperthreading. Remember, this thing doesn't have hyperthreading. So RAM gains on this have been very, very limited. Yeah. Oh, and I also touched this voltage, I guess. Didn't touch any other voltages because the CPU is... We're just telling the CPU to turbo a bit more. So we, yeah, don't need to do anything about the... We could undervolt a bit, but honestly, with the AIO on it, the CPU does not get very hot, as long as the pump runs. So that's the BIOS side of things. I did overclock the graphics card too. We can take a look at that just now. I also tweaked the OS to be a bit more, you know, performative, but it is Windows 11. And hardware this old doesn't specifically work that well on Windows 11. Well, given that Windows 7 just kind of doesn't work anymore for a number of games by now, I guess we're gonna have to use it. We could use Windows 10, but honestly, that's not that big of a difference. Like, I'm mostly just on Windows 11 because that's the OS that was on the drive I grabbed. Like, you can see here that this used to be like a bench OS. But yeah, so I did record some very limited impact numbers. So yeah, you know, we gained a few gigaflops from setting up our RAM. But as you can see, like, we get 20 gigaflops from enabling XMP, and then only like around 15 from setting timings, like specifically very important timings like RRD and T4. Didn't do that much. My best guess is because this quad core without hyperthreading at admittedly pretty low clocks and IPC just doesn't really care that much about RAM. And also we are already running dual rank, which means that timings have less of an impact. And yeah, so that's basically why I didn't really bother doing that much with RAM. I did bother with the graphics card though. So this is our 760 192-bit. If you wonder where, this is a special edition of the 760 that's pretty much exclusively found in a number of pre-built systems. Like, essentially it's a 760, but instead of having 256 bits, it has 192, which also means it only has 1.5 gigabytes of VRAM. That looks like a pretty big issue, and it is, but surprisingly enough, this has not really hindered the card in performing. Like, I'm surprised with how well this card actually handled the games that I've installed here. Like, all of these are playable. It runs all of these games, and like, not a single time that I have to resort to like low graphics settings or like any performance tweaks. Like, it runs pretty much all the games at least medium, if not higher. Like, some of them it runs maxed out, which I am very surprised by. Like, the 760 192-bit is not really that fast, even at the time it came out. Like, a normal 760, that would be like a mid-range value card. But this 192-bit is a cut-down version of that. Very cut down, not just in hardware, but also, like, if you look at the power limits, that's not a lot, even if it's maxed out at 140 watts. Like, a GK104 can draw a lot more power than that if you give it enough voltage. And speaking of the voltage, yeah, it runs at below 1.1 volts. Most other Kepler cards ship at like 1.18 to 1.2 volts, which also means that the clock speeds are kind of meh. It can do a little bit more than this on both core and memory, but it would crash every now and then, so I put it down a little bit more to stay safe, because surprisingly enough, even though this is a blower card, and even though the fan, when it's, you know, like, if I give the fan, you can hear that, right? You know, are you really getting the authentic blower card experience if you don't hear that every time you start a game? But yeah, surprisingly enough, even with the admittedly overkill amount of cooling that this card gets when the fan is maxed out, it does actually lose some overclocking headroom from being in a case rather than my open air test bench. It did a lot better there. But yeah, so that's slight card overclock from, just that's a GPU overclock, and I guess we could start getting into our games now. So I installed a number of games, some of which I played back then to just, like, you know, see them one more time. Some others I didn't, but think they were somewhat representative of, you know, either the time of where this hardware came out or are games that you could still play today on this kind of hardware. So I guess let's just start going through them. Alright, so we are in Minecraft, and we can already see performance is surprisingly bad. That is because it's loading in chunks. Once it has loaded everything in... Oh, there's a village there, that's nice. Once it has loaded everything in, you can see we're going above 100 FPS. Minecraft is an interesting case in terms of performance, because I remember when I had my first custom PC, which was hardware than this, straight up everything about it was worse than what we have on this PC right now, it ran the game at like 600 FPS. So why doesn't this? Well, Minecraft's engine has changed quite a lot since then, especially I think 1.13 was an update where it's like gotten specifically hard to like load chunks. And then the entire cave update thing made things even worse, to the point where even my 8700K had problems just creating new chunks in this game. So this quad-core, without hyper-threading, that's locked and using DDR3 is obviously not gonna have that great of a time. Like right now, you know, it's fine FPS. But when I start moving, you can see the problem because we're loading in new chunks in that area there. And yeah, so Minecraft is surprisingly bad, I would say. Not unplayable bad, like if you play in a regular survival world where you don't really move that fast. Like, you know, right now it's perfectly fine. There's a lava lake in this village. It's playable, but I'm surprised how much FPS you lose just going with the newer Minecraft version. Like, this game used to run a lot faster than it does now. Admittedly, it also had a lot less content than it does now. We're running 1.20. Back then I was at version like 1.3 to 1.5, something like that. With a completely different, just everything engine for the game. So it's not like, you know, the hardware has gotten worse or anything. The game has just gotten a lot bigger in scope and the kind of hardware that it's optimized for. So yeah, this is... I mean, I was kind of expecting this, but it's still surprising how much harder Minecraft is to run these days than it was back then. To a point where if you install a shader pack, Minecraft is actually one of the hardest to run games that you can get right now. Because it's gonna max out your CPU and GPU. Like, not many games can do that. But yeah, so, I mean, it is of course playable. It's fine, it's Minecraft. But yeah, this is a bit of an outlier, because this is a lot worse than I remember it. So let's move on to something that's a little bit better. So here we are going from the slight disappointment that was Minecraft to possibly the best performing game, which is CSGO. So we're running the game completely maxed out. Every setting is at its maximum, and we're running offline with bots, which actually puts a higher CPU load on the PC than a regular online game would. And we're getting 144 Hz ready FPS. Like, this is completely fine, even for like high level play. Even though I am actually on a 144 Hz display. The problem is, because of my capture card, I can only run it at 60 Hz. So I'm not experiencing what this could be right now. Well, I guess I'm getting the input lag from it, but yeah, this would be a perfectly fine, smooth gaming experience. Like, this game you could run just like my current daily system does. Admittedly at 1080p and not 1440p, but I mean, that's not really that big of a problem, I would say. So yeah, like, this is perfectly fine. That's possibly the best example of what this PC is still capable of, because if you play CSGO as your main game, then I don't see a reason why you would want anything better than this. You could still use this hardware perfectly fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, with the performance that you're getting here. So, Watch Dogs. Does anybody remember Watch Dogs? I do. This game, together with PlanetSide 2, is actually the biggest reason why I wanted a better graphics card than my 650. Because, I mean, we're getting 60-ish FPS, but you can see the game doesn't specifically look that great. The settings are medium. To be honest, it doesn't look that great for medium settings. Yeah, maybe I'm just remembering this game as a lot prettier than it actually is, but performance in this is not, you know, I mean, it's playable. It just doesn't look that great. So, I mean, you can play this on this hardware, but there was a specific reason why I upgraded to a 780 Ti and not a 760 192-bit. 780 Ti is gonna be more than twice the performance of this, like, yeah. But still, the game runs. It is fine. Like, yeah. I also, like, right now the game spawned me in like this remote area, but I did go to the big city as well to make sure the FPS are fine. They are. Sometimes you can drop down to like 50 FPS, but honestly, it's not that bad. Like, let's see if we can appropriate a car. Oh yeah, the driving in this game was a bit interesting. But, like, it's fine. The FPS are fine, it's playable. It's not really that big of a problem. I mean, the graphics card is screaming with its fan, but the game is playable. I don't really know what else to say about this. It works. And I mean, yeah, it's fine. Only a bit disappointed with what the game looks like. Like, I remember this game looking really bad on my 650, because that card could barely run the game. I had to reduce the resolution down to 900p. So this is still better than that, but quite honestly, I can see why I went with a 780 Ti for this game. Among other things. This wasn't the only thing I wanted a better card for, but this is the game that showed me my 650 was not gonna work out in the future. So, here we have Alien Isolation. A game released about the same time as Watch Dogs, but does this game ever look better? Like, I think this game came out in 2014, and quite honestly, it looks like I would not be able to, like, this looks like a modern game, to be honest. Like, if you look really closely, yeah, you can see how this is slightly old, but if I would compare this to modern games, quite honestly, this looks perfectly fine, and even better, we're getting way more than 60 FPS, and this is maxed out settings. Like, the game is completely maxed out, we're getting more than 60 FPS, and the game looks so good. Like, this is one of the best looking games. I'm getting shot at. Like, this is an incredibly pretty game from the time. Like, even today, this, like, just look at the lighting effects, just the environment that they have, and even the sound design of this game is just amazing. Like, I had a really good time playing this game when I finally got it. And if I had gotten it back in 2014, I'm pretty sure this game would have been, you know, very good. Yeah. Like, even these small details on this one thing that it's surprisingly good. Like, this game is just great, and it performs just fine. You can play this maxed out, and honestly, I wish any game would be like this, that it looks good, you can run it maxed out, and it performs really well even on lower range, mid-range cards. Ah yes, PlanetSide 2, the other main reason I wanted a better graphics card, and if you look at this right now, we're running the game at medium, you would probably be forgiven for thinking that this performance is quite awful. Now, PlanetSide is another example, kind of like Minecraft. This game has gone through a lot of development since, you know, the early 2010s, and it's quite different now than it was back then, and this lobby area is quite new, and thankfully pretty much the only part of the game that performs like this, because once we go to Indar, you're going to see that we will be getting our 60-ish FPS, actually a bit more than that, just fine. And to be honest, the graphics card is not going to be the main problem in this game. Once the big fights start, like the really big fights, any CPU, and really any CPU, including Ryzen 7000 X3D CPUs, they will just go down, because this game just, yeah, the big fights are just really, really performance intensive. But yeah, like, so we're in the Indar lobby now, and you can see immediately 79, 80 FPS. This is just fine. I'm gonna get ourselves a scythe and fly around a little bit, and this performance is now completely fine. Like, even getting 100 FPS here. Map, please load. Let's go to the crown and try to see what a big battle might look like on this, because, like, right now the graphics card is doing whatever it can. Once we're in a big battle, the graphics card will be the least of our problems. And that's really where the problem with this game comes from. You need a lot of CPU performance. Like, yeah. I'm probably gonna get shot down. So I'm just gonna do that and run away. So yeah, there doesn't seem to be that much going on around here. That's probably my problem for trying to play this game at 11 a.m. Not that many people online. That, I mean, some stuff is happening, as we can hear. And we're still getting 70 FPS. It's not that bad, actually. Like, it's playable. It's fine. So, you can play the game. It doesn't look all that pretty, especially because, like, we have no anti-aliasing active. But looking pretty was never really PlanetSide's thing. They did actually downgrade the graphics engine a while ago. The game used to look a lot prettier than it does these days on maxed out settings. But it also ran a lot worse. So, yeah, the game works. It's fine. You can play this still. But I wouldn't be surprised if you get into a really big battle, like actually this area. Like this area on Inda is like, because you can see it's like in the middle of the map, so usually all three factions are fighting over it. And then there's like this big open area here where there's a lot of stuff happening. This tends to have rather big battles, but what's happening right here is not really that big. This is like a small to medium battle. Like, you can see it says 12 to 24 enemies, not even dropped down. It's not that many. Big battles are like 96 plus on each side. And, you know, we're not having that right now because not many people are online. But yeah, this game works. It doesn't look that great on these settings. But the problem is also if I set this to Ultra. Well, most settings need a restart to apply. I guess the anti-aliasing is on now. But yeah, the game works. You know, like every game that I'm gonna show, it works. That game just ran into a wall. Let me join him. But yeah. Chip down memory lane with this old hardware in PlanetSide 2. I'm surprised how well it runs. It's, it used to be a lot worse than this. Oh, we're gonna die. Yeah, I'm dead. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Alright, so here we have a somewhat newer game. So this is Subnautica, and specifically the newest version of Subnautica, because it has recently gotten an engine upgrade to the same engine that the sequel, Below Zero, is using. Which is actually, like, it looks better and it's a bit harder to run. But, yeah, our PC actually doesn't have any problems with this. We are, again, running, you know, medium, and we're getting pretty much exactly 60 FPS. So this is just fine. Completely playable, even though this version of the game does completely break the multiplayer mod my friends and I were using. But, yeah, this is fine. So it can run newer games, not that Subnautica is specifically hard to run. No, I mean, it's not the easiest game to run, but it's also not specifically hard to run. But yeah, I mean, this also works. And I don't really know what else to say about this. It's just fine, I would say. So, now we're dropping down a little bit to like the 50 FPS-ish, but it's playable. This game doesn't really need the highest FPS. Like, I play Microsoft Flight Sim at like 40 FPS on my main system sometimes, because I just really like spawning in the A310 enhanced with way too many things going on. But yeah, like, I would still call this playable. You can maybe like put the settings down a little bit to get a few more FPS, but honestly, I don't really care that much. Subnautica doesn't need that many FPS, and like, the new graphics engine does make this game look a lot better. I think there's some extra anti-aliasing going on compared to the older engine, because it looks a lot smoother, and I think they also updated some lighting a little bit. So the game does look a lot prettier than it used to on the old engine, and it still runs on hardware from the early 2010s. So this is a bit of a throwback. This is Borderlands the pre-sequel. This is the game that I got for free with my 780 Ti when I upgraded, so I actually never played this on my old 650. But we're looking at the settings here. It's maxed out. We even have physics on Ultra, and look at those FPS. Now, there's not really anything going around here. Once we do start fighting things, the FPS will go down, but this is just fine. This game runs way better than I thought it would, because I remember my 780 Ti having some rather big problems with this game, which in retrospect probably was actually my CPU having problems and me not knowing how to diagnose that. So, yeah, like, I mean, this is, yeah, like, we have the physics stuff going on here, which, yeah, name the last game that you know uses physics like this. This might actually be the newest game that I own that has physics. But yeah, like, this is very playable. Like, we're getting really good FPS, and the game is maxed out. So I was quite surprised from this, because this game hasn't gotten any updates since that time. This is pretty much the same game it was back then, and it's just fine. Like, way better than I remember. So yeah, this is quite a good experience, actually. And on to Skyrim. So yeah, I actually didn't play this game that much. I did one playthrough of this game a while ago, when I already had my 2080 Ti, and I was very disappointed when I found out that Bethesda Creation Engine games are locked to 60 FPS, and you can't go above that. So yeah, but I mean, it's Skyrim, and it's stock Skyrim, so we're not using any 8K texture mods here. That would probably murder the graphics card. But it's working. It's running at the advertised and maxed out 60 FPS. And as for the settings, this is the high preset. It's not running Ultra. If I set the Ultra preset, we will go to about 45 FPS. But it's doing high. And yeah, like, I guess it's not too big of a surprise that this works. It's Skyrim. But if I'm gonna be completely honest, this game actually looks pretty good still. Like, yeah, it's not comparable to, like, The Witcher in its realism. But considering, like, what Watch Dogs looked like, this is looking better than Watch Dogs. And this is a much older game. A game that has a lot of mods that you can install that makes it look even better. So, yeah, and I mean, it is completely playable. I mean, the target for my entire project here is 1080p 60 FPS, but this game really does not run at higher than 60 FPS, so yeah. But Skyrim works. Okay, so here we have the last of our games, and I'm really surprised that this runs well. I mean, this is the same overall engine as CSGO, but we're playing single player. And yeah, so of course Portal 2 runs just fine, and how do I get to that cube? I need that to finish the test. I guess I could just do that. But yeah, like, this game is, again, just like CSGO, it's completely maxed out with the graphics settings, and we're getting, like, we could connect this to, like, a 240 Hz display, and you would not notice that this is, in fact, running on, like, a decade-old hardware. So, yeah, this is... I'll take it back with CSGO being the best performing one, because this is way better. We're, like, almost the entire time above 200 FPS. Like, getting close to 300 even. So... thanks, GLaDOS. So yeah, of course this game still works, and I guess I walked into the... Oh, that's how we progress. It's working just fine. I mean, it's Portal 2. Of course it works. It's it's a Source Engine Valve game. Of course this runs. But if I... Is she gonna talk again? No. If I may put this into perspective, I am surprised how well this works. All the games are playable. Now, admittedly, they're not like new 2023 AAA games. You gotta somewhat set your expectations right for this, but everything still works, and this is a locked CPU with a pretty blocked down motherboard. Like, again, don't even have BCLK adjustment. The RAM is only slightly tweaked. The graphics card is a locked down, well, not really locked down, more like cut down OEM version of what a average mid-range card was back then. And also, I didn't mention yet, the hard drive that all of these games are installed on is really old and really slow. And everything just kind of still works. I'm genuinely thinking about, like, replacing my daily system with this for, like, a day or two. To just, like, you know, do whatever I do on this system. Because, like, of course, these are not the games that I play day in, day out. I play other games. Like, I would test them here, but they are quite big. Like, sometimes I still play Destiny 2. I play Ark Survival Evolved. I play modded Minecraft. I guess that would have fit on here, but nah. Like, Rainbow Six Siege. I also play that. So, didn't really test those games. And to be honest, I don't expect this PC to do that well in them. It's probably gonna run Siege, but the others are gonna be problematic. So, but like, it was interesting to just kinda go back and just kind of experience what I quite never really got. I experienced early 2010s really low end, and I experienced early 2010s really high end. But I never got to see this part of it, which I find actually, this is perfectly fine. I mean, I wanted a 780 Ti and I got 780 Ti. It's still to this day probably my favorite graphics card, because it was just the coolest thing back then. But yeah, I think this is just fine. I do kind of miss the good old times of when my 780 Ti was getting kind of old, you know, around 2018. You know, 780 Ti getting pretty old back then, 3 gigabytes of VRAM, which is that's already twice as much as this thing has. Was getting kind of low back then, and I had to run most of my games on like DirectX 10 mode on like low settings, because I had already had a 144 Hz display then, and of course I wanted to get those FPS. It was a simpler time, I'd say. Of course, now I have a 2080 Ti and I can run all of those games at 1440p with way higher settings than that. But the days will come too where my 2080 Ti will need to run games at low settings, because I'm sure as hell not buying a 4090, and I'm sure as hell not ready to deal with AMD drivers, so maybe Intel will do something interesting, who knows. Anyway, I think this video is long enough now. I gotta be completely honest, I don't really know why anyone would watch this video. Yeah. I was just like, hey, how about I put together a PC that I probably should have had back in the day, but never really ended up having, and just kind of see what it does. And the answer is, well, it plays games. And that's gonna be it. I might do another one of these. I might want to do one with my OC formula and the i7-6700. That one I can actually overclock with like a 980 or something. Because I also never really got to see that. Because that was the time when I was still using my 780 Ti. and it was getting really old. And then I got my 2080 Ti, which is like, again, like a really big jump where I didn't really experience the middle part. So I might do another one if I feel like it. But in the meantime, I should really get back to cheap-ass chips. There's like 1 week left, and I still haven't e-powered my card, nor have I gotten really good results yet. So it's about time. Anyway, until then, goodbye.